much for the invite.
I think, as I said to you, as on our kind of calls in the run up to this, the idea of the podcast that we're hosting, which we've already had some really cool sessions around various different bits and pieces, all leading into the topic of what is the impact of not or the cost of not doing something related to kind of talent. So I think the view is that in light of the kind of economic challenges that we've had, I think TA has been rocked quite a bit, and we've seen it happen in cycles as well. It's kind of growth, and then it's no more budget, let's slice all of that and reduce headcount and all of that. So I think I was quite keen to explore various kind of topics that were all maybe possibly seen as value add at times, or at least maybe kind of long-term investments that when you're kind of looking at doing something in these sorts of times might be seen as not quite what an organisation might see as commercially a great idea at the time. And exploring those things and then almost flipping it on its head and being like, well, actually, what do you think would happen if we didn't do these things? So that's kind of the...
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. So I don't know if you want to just introduce yourself.
Sure. So nice to be here. My background is TA predominantly. Most recently, I was based in Germany working for Adidas as their global head of TA and also their global head of employee experience, two varied and quite different roles. Before that, I was predominantly working investment banking. I was head of Americas TA for BNP Paribas. Before that, done a range of roles in TA and wider talent at companies like HSBC, Santander, BP, Barclays.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and currently a full-time puppy dad.
Best job. Amazing. And what would you like to explore today, Richard?
So I wanted to talk about early careers programs, and I guess a number of reasons I wanted to talk about them. Sort of firstly, I think you set it up really nicely talking about these programs that tend to be sort of longer term and maybe have budgets sliced or trimmed during difficult economic times. I think early careers notoriously have a long-term return on investment when done properly. Secondly, I think they tend to get overlooked quite often as some heads of HR or heads of business think of early careers, not that strategic, not that beneficial to the organisation, nice to have, not essential. And so I think it's a really fun topic. It's sometimes an overlooked topic, and actually it's something which gives a really good indication of the health of a HR organisation, because if you've got good strategic early careers programs, it generally means the organisation is understanding the requirement to invest in people for long-term benefits of the organisation. The HR function is strategically aligned to the global direction of the organisation, and you've probably got great stakeholders as well. So I think it's a really good indicator of a healthy and strategic and forward-looking HR function.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think particularly when it comes to things like culture of a business and experience of someone in the organisation. Kind of a lot of the kind of stories that you see of people in those number one spots, people do really like a grow your own type.
I think it's great. I think there's nothing more rewarding for a HR function to see one of their own who was on an internship program sort of rise through the ranks, become that MD, become that CEO. I remember, I don't want to call out specific organisations, but one organisation I've worked in the past, I remember about 50% of the board had been on their original graduate program some 20-25 years ago. And obviously you've got to have the blend, you've got to have a mix of those homegrown talents with some senior external talent coming in, and you've got to have a balance of the two. But it's really rewarding seeing those people grow through the organisation. They tend to be huge culture carriers, they tend to be huge brand ambassadors for the organisation, and they know where all the things are hidden in the closet. They know all those broken bits, and they know, 15 years ago we tried it and it didn't work because of X, Y, and Z, so you need to balance in certain different thoughts and perspectives as well.
Retention.
Yeah. I think there was an analysis, I can't remember what organisation did it at the end of last year or maybe beginning of this year, that a good internal graduate program or apprentice program can save up to, over a period of time, about 74-75% of external hiring costs through properly bringing in this early talent, growing them through the organisation and moving them across the organisation. One of the challenges is that when you're in a budget cycle at an organisation, you're forced, understandably to some extent, by finance to think about a 12-month cycle rather than a 5-year or 10-year cycle. And because the ROI is, well, the maximum ROI is over a 5 or 10 year, and you're forced to think about the 12-month, it gets sliced.
Yeah, very much so. What do you see, like, you know, if you're kind of talking about a good early careers program can do, you know, X, Y, and Z, where would you start in terms of what do you think good looks like there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the most important thing is strategic alignment, and it's one of the most difficult things, particularly in current climate. So in the current climate, organisations are forced, because of the economic instability, to think a little bit more short term, and therefore having 5-10 year business vision is very difficult. And the most important thing for an early careers program is to know where that organisation is heading, and therefore to understand the skills gaps that the organisation is facing, and then you plug in early careers programs aligned to that long-term vision. And if the organisation at the board and down don't have that long-term vision because they're making short-term reactive decisions, it's very hard to have an early careers program aligned to something that doesn't exist. So for me, most important thing, strategic alignment, senior stakeholder buy-in, understanding the purpose of the program. And different programs have different purposes in organizations. So you can have early careers programs, which are true pipelines to your executive talent. You can have early careers programs, which are to plug technical skills gaps immediately. When you think about things like AI or even investment banking, yeah, you need to bring those people in. They don't necessarily have the knowledge or capability straight from university. You need to develop that early careers program, and the revenue making or generating relatively quickly, so they can be to plug those skill gaps straight away. They can be about DE&I. They can be around a number innovation and new thinking. But to understand that, like I said, the strategic direction of the organisation, then understand the purpose of the early careers program and have that stakeholder buy-in. They, for me, are the most important things. Then there's loads of sort of tactical things around it. Do you have the right attraction? Do you understand the selection methodology to actually identify what does great potential mean for your organisation, and how do you assess what great potential is? How do you make sure you're getting a broad range of diversity into the organisation? And then you can assess and hire really great talent. But I think one of the potential shortfalls that I see a number of organisations look at early careers talent as is if we want to think about people as a product, which I don't necessarily promote, but let's do that for a short period. The finished product of an early careers talent, be that a graduate, be that an apprentice, is not necessarily the bum on seat day one. Then you need the development and the growth for the next 18 or 24 months to make sure they get to where they need to be. And the strongest talent or the strongest performer on day one of an apprenticeship or a graduate program is not necessarily the strongest performer long term in the organisation. If we look at, well, I've done most of my career in banking, yeah? You might hire someone from a top tier university on an economics degree, and you might hire someone also from a music degree, yeah? I can guarantee that day one of that graduate program, the economics student is going to be a better performer, but the music student, over a long period of time, once they've had the training, the technical knowledge given to them, the support, the coaching, the development, could easily be the top performer. So you've got to think about that potential, that performance, the return on the investment on the long term.
It's like the soft skills versus hard skills thing as well, isn't it?
Exactly. It's all about those soft skills you bring in, that potential, the ability, the mindset of growth to grow and ultimately make a longer term impact.
Yeah. Where have you experienced challenges in terms of kind of getting that buy-in and investment into, you know, building what are, you know, really kind of high, best in class, let's say, like early careers programs?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's obviously easier when you go into an organisation. Some organisations have early careers programs like in their DNA.
Yeah.
They've done it for, you know, donkey's years. Half of their board are members of those early careers programs, and they want to buy into it. And they get it. You know, they understand the need for it. That is a little bit easier. On the flip side, they tend to have really strong ideas and opinions about how those programs should be run and want it run the same way as 1980.
These things were good when I did it.
Exactly. Whereas most challenging is where you don't have it in that DNA, and particularly in those sectors, I think, where there is going to be massive gaps in the workforce in 5 or 10 years' time. If we go back and look at, for instance, technology companies, they realised this 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it's almost been an industry-wide movement that there's not enough technical ability coming through universities and schools, and so they need these development programs for basically the good of the sector. But if it's not ingrained in the DNA of that organisation, it becomes really, really challenging. And then the other particular challenge at the moment is, as I touched on sort of a moment ago, is the fact that as HR functions and as businesses, economic downturn, economic instability, you're looking at a 12-month financial cycle, and most of the ROI on these early careers folk is 5-10 years plus if it's done well. And therefore, when you look at that analysis, it's like, oh, well, 1 plus 1 is not making 3, as it were, so we can just pause it. And there's sometimes organisations can get away with that little bit of trimming for 12 months or whatever, but then 5-10 years down the line, probably when someone else has moved into the position, that's when it catches up with you. And it really does, it impacts organisations massively. First we've got the skills gaps, both short and long term.
Which is becoming more and more aggressive now, I think, isn't it? The cycles of skills gaps shorter and shorter.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, the obvious one, what everybody's talking about, AI. There is not an abundance of talent yet coming out of schools and universities that have the AI skills. So the only way you can fix that short-term skills gap is having the development programs, particularly for early talent, in your organisation is absolutely vital. So those cycles, as you say, get ever more aggressive. And within sometimes 12, 18, but certainly 24, 36 months, there could be real problems, not just for your organisation, but also organisations for the sector you operate in. Because if you haven't grown the talent yourself, and if other organisations in the sector are also not growing the talent, then where are you going to find that talent from? There's going to be a massive backlog.
There's a loyalty piece there as well, isn't there? Like, say you've got, 4 companies that are all hiring for the best of the best in AI, one notorious for its learning and development programs and being able to kind of grow their own as well. I mean, obviously you're a lot more experienced in this than I, but the retention piece must be quite...
Retention is vital. I think what's really cool and exciting in early career space, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, is the focus ever more so on alumni. So what's really interesting, and I particularly saw this in New York with some of the fintech organisations, is everybody talks now about attrition, and some early careers talent is more short term and they want to hop and try different organisations and maybe a little bit less loyal. But what's really fascinating is if they've joined an organisation on a great early careers programme, they might go somewhere else for 2 or 3 years, but you see ever more boomerang talent coming back to organisations. The other really important thing, whether they are that talent that stays in your organisation 25 years and gets up to the CEO role or leave, is if talent comes in your early careers programs, they are some of, if not the most strong brand ambassadors that you could have as an organisation. And the positive impact good and strong early careers programs have on your on your employer brand in the market is huge. And actually, if you want to extrapolate that and look at, for instance, I was most recently at Adidas, so a consumer brand that sells products, our early careers programs, when you look at the pool of talent we're talking to from application through to program, we probably interacted with several 100,000 people in that process. And if you give them a good experience, and I can tell you, sorry, taking a step back, if they are interested enough in your organisation, like Adidas, to apply for an early careers or an employment program with you, they're probably interested enough with you to be buying product. And if you give them a strong experience from a prospective employee or an applicant, then they're probably going to be a stronger brand advocate as well. If you turn that in reverse, let's say Richard is a 18-year-old applying, for his apprenticeship for the first time. He's a really strong advocate of the Adidas brand. He really wants to work for Adidas. He applies and he has a lousy experience. Is Richard more or less likely to go and buy the product? He's less likely to buy the product. So actually the financial impact can be really substantial. So like I say, early careers programs, several 100,000 candidates we were dealing with at Adidas, and the same goes for the whole recruitment process. I think we interacted with 1 million plus candidates a year most time. And if you give those people lousy experiences, they're not going to buy the product. They're not going to be advocate for either the corporate commercial brand or the employer brand as well.
Which that many people starts making quite a bit of a dip there.
It really does. You take that over a few cycles, and people talk. Particularly talking about early careers talent, particularly the generation of TikTok and everything like that. Everything is a 30-second interaction, and it spreads like wildfire in terms of people's opinion on organisations, processes, companies, and everything like that. So it's really good early careers programs can really enhance and support a good corporate brand, an employer brand, but bad early careers programs can really be to the detriment of both the employer brand and the corporate brand as well.
Yeah. And what about diversity and inclusion? Because we've touched upon that a little bit, and I feel like it's interesting because kind of talking about what happens when things are busier and the investment into early careers, and how things get quieter, and maybe it's on the reverse. And I mean, I can definitely see that in terms of the work that I do. I've been a lot busier in early careers for tech, let's say, in busier times. It's gone down a little bit probably more recently, but one of the things that always comes up is the impact on diversity and inclusion, particularly when you're hiring for this niche talent. You want to be able to be in tune with your D&I policy, but if there's only a certain amount of people that do whatever specialism it might be.
I mean, for me, early careers is one of the only sustainable solutions for long-term DE&I in organisations and certain sectors. You look at, in fact, let me pick on my old sector, banking. When you look at the senior folk in banking, even today, it's getting better, but even today, the most senior folk in banking are white, heterosexual males. And if you're if your exec search team are hiring every talent in to fill those senior roles because you don't have that internal pipeline, most of your candidates, unfortunately, I mean, there's some great candidates out there that are white, heterosexual males, but most of your candidates are going to be. So the sector as a whole needs to bring in these healthy early careers pipelines of really diverse talent and move and grow them through both the organisation but the industry. Without that, you're going to end up with this homogenous group of talent that you're all sort of, I guess, regurgitating around yourselves over and over again. So D&I really impactful, and I used to love it. Like, I remember back 10, 15 years ago when my job was heading up early careers or whatever, and you used to look at your class of graduates or interns or apprenticeships and seeing the diversity there and seeing the strength of diversity of thought as well. It's super healthy for an organisation. It's super healthy for a hiring manager as well. If you're a hiring manager and you've got an intern coming in or an apprentice coming in from a background with different perspectives from what you have, it's really beneficial. It grows the hiring manager. One of the bigger trends at the moment is this reverse mentorship that goes on in organisations. So, 5, 10, 15 years ago, it was all about mentorship in terms of someone with 25 years experience, supporting the development and growth of the person with 1 or 2 years experience. Now, with the pace of technology, AI, digital, everything like that, more and more organisations are using their apprenticeships and graduates and interns to train up the senior managers. And if those people are coming from diverse backgrounds with different perspectives as well, it really accelerates the growth and the wholeness of the senior folk in the organisation. So that was a long-winded answer saying D&I, early careers, absolutely linked, and like I say, one of the only sustainable ways to really solve diversity problems, particularly in some sectors which are worse than others.
Yeah, and I guess from a cultural perspective as well, isn't it? Because
you can really drive an organisation's culture through the, and again, I'm going to pick on banking just because that's where I particularly specialised in early
I think you
careers.
see it a lot in
Yeah.
banking as well, isn't it? I think banking is an industry which is...
You see it, they grow it, they have
Yeah.
huge programs. I do think there is a bit of almost like a sector movement that we need to change the industry, and the way we do that is bringing in these early talent pipelines for the good of the organisation and the wider industry. And I remember, if I think about the markets division in banking, so the sales and traders, think Wolf of Wall Street for those of you that don't know banking, but in a nicer light. It's not like that anymore. And I used to, in the middle of our internship or the beginning of our graduate program, whatever, walk across the trading floor, and like every 5 or 6 desks there would be someone we'd hire through an early careers program, and over the space of 2 or 3 years you could actually really affect the entire vibe, culture, environment, attitude, behaviours in the organisation through structured, proper, invested early careers programs. It was a really it's almost like a sort of goosebump moment. You used to really enjoy walking through the floor and seeing those people and how they had affected the culture of the overall organisation. Really enjoyable and really, like we keep saying, really beneficial for the organisation as well.
Yeah, thank you. And let's say, kind of turning it on its head, I mean, we've explored some, kind of as we've kind of gone through different parts of what makes an early careers function good, some of those kind of negative impacts of not doing it, for example, in D&I and culture, etc. But, let's kind of take it in the context of, we 12, kind of thinking of these 12-month impacts rather than the long term. What do you view to be
the short-term impact of not doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, a number of things. So first of all, immediately employer brand and reputational. All these organisations invest now so much time and money, university campuses, schools, employer branding. As soon as you slice the numbers that you're hiring or affect or reduce that investment, it really gets noticed and it gets felt across university campuses, schools, candidate markets as well. And then, like we touched on earlier, it can also affect your corporate brand. And it takes years to reinvest that. Gone are the days where, I'm going to pick on a random company now, let me think, Goldman Sachs. Yeah, I've never worked for Goldman Sachs, but 10 years ago, Goldman Sachs, they were the organisation. 90% of students wanted, or 90% of business students would want to work at a Goldman Sachs. Whereas actually today, it's more of the niche, nimble, up-and-coming organisations people want to. People probably look at Goldman Sachs as a little bit old-fashioned. And so they've spent a lot of money, you see it in their employer branding, trying to position themselves appropriately. If they cut that suddenly because they aren't doing their early careers programs, that's going to impact them massively. Second thing you'll see immediately, in some sectors more than others, is although there's a longer term ROI for these graduates, apprenticeships, early careers programs, they are doing work on day one. And if that gets cut, then those middle and more senior people are going to have to do more of the more junior work. And then that really affects actually engagement in the wider organisation and therefore retention. So I think, again, I wish I had done some proper notes on this, but I read a report maybe a few months ago about the link directly around cutting early careers programs directly impacting employee engagement from listening surveys straight away. And so it drives engagement down in the organisation.
Which I think we have been seeing recently. There's I think the burnout piece and
Yeah, exactly. People want to, and also, to those teams and divisions that have typically had graduates and apprenticeships in, it shows that the organisation is not investing in people anymore. It's a very tangible, visible sign around whether an organisation is investing in its people or not. As soon as early careers programs get cut or reduced, it's a signal for that. And then some of the broader topics, like we said, so skills gaps, both short and long term, D&I issues, immediately visible if you don't have your early careers programs, but also opportunity lost around things, like governmental incentives. These days in the UK market particularly, there's the apprenticeship levy. It's a huge opportunity, a huge missed opportunity if organisations are not leveraging that properly and investing it into their organisation and building these these pipelines. It's just essentially wasted taxed money if you don't invest it. So those would be some of the things that I would mention.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think because you kind of view a lot of, well, like you say, like, you know, you hire someone in as a graduate or even on an internship program, and it's a long time before you might see them, you know, running their own show within the business, and you know, coming back with, you know, their various kind of ROI data and such. But actually, quite clearly, you know, there is a short-term impact to be had by both on the presence and the loss of
some of these
people.
people make, you know, impact straight away. I remember vaguely, and I can't remember the details, but you know, way back at one organisation I was working in, there was a big deal going on, and I think it was an intern or a very early graduate was bringing in a whole lot of market intelligence and insight from social media that the senior team were just not engaged on. They weren't even aware of it, and so that was really bringing in a new way of thinking, a new way to gather market intelligence straight away. And you know, these people do come in with different ways of thinking, different ways of working.
They're all a lot more tech savvy naturally as well, aren't they? I think even like, you know, kind of looking at kind of where I'm at in terms of what I learned at school and at university, and you know, feel probably a little bit like a bit of a dinosaur compared to a lot of people that are kind of coming into the world of work with all these different kind of, you know, tricks up their sleeves around how to be efficient, leverage AI just naturally because they have been doing it. And
I mean, you know, if we think about the people coming through school and university today, first of all, you're quite right, there are a lot more, generalisation, but they are more tech savvy because the pace of change that they've been exposed to is that much greater. You know, they've all been brought up with iPads and iPhones and AI these days to do their dissertations on and everything like that. But also, actually, another skill that I think we see a lot of early careers talent bringing through is the resilience. If you imagine the people graduating come through schools now have just been through COVID and lockdowns, and I can tell you if I had done that at the age of 18 or 19 or 20, I don't know if I would have coped as well as most of these people. It's a really difficult age, what they've been exposed to and what they've seen. So there's a lot of resilience as well as the innovation coming through from this talent, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and then I think, kind of going back to the point around all of the investment. I mean, everyone's talking about skills right now, aren't they? And that we're in this race for talent and getting the, need to get the best people in, and it's, kind of almost seems like one of the best times ever to invest in early careers, but also we're against the backdrop of the bit of a challenge, aren't we?
It's a backdrop of challenge. There's lots of instability, but also instability and the world being shaken up a little bit is a time and an opportunity to look at things a little bit differently and maybe reimagine your early careers programs. I think maybe it's a nice sort of loop and close to it. I think one of the challenges I would give, and I mentioned earlier, I think seeing good, strategic, healthy early careers programs is generally a good indication of how strong a HR function is, I think.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking long term, they're strategically aligned to the organisation, they've got good stakeholder buy-in. The one challenge I'd give to some of those organisations is some of them, they do have these well invested, well run, well managed early careers programs, but the world has changed so much. It's probably time to reinvent them and think about them a little bit differently. And some of them could be a little bit stuck in their ways. So I think the opportunity and challenge for TA teams, and particularly those early careers teams within the TA or talent teams, is how do we reinvent early careers programs for today's world of instability, dynamic change, volatility, and that's quite an exciting challenge.
Big challenge, but definitely very exciting one.
Yeah, super cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining and sharing some of your expertise. I think there's really quite a lot of people that will find it quite insightful and interesting.
Really enjoyed it. As you can tell, I love talking. So lots of fun. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you.